You're useless. I don't need you anymore. Those were the last words Nathan shouted before hurling my suitcase down the steps of our home in Manchester, England. I stood there frozen, watching 15 years of marriage collapse in less than 10 minutes. My cheeks were still stained with tears as he tossed out my belongings with the satisfaction of someone clearing out junk they should have gotten rid of long ago. My name is Rachel. I'm 39. And never in my life did I imagine I'd be left without a roof over my head just because the man I gave everything to decided I wasn't good enough anymore. His father, Arthur, had died just 4 days earlier, and Nathan was already acting like the world belonged to him. Watch until the end, because the man who called me worthless ended up begging on his knees. I'm worth £63 million now, Rachel, he shouted from the doorway, his face flushed with triumph. I don't need some waitress dragging me down anymore. I'm going to live like royalty. The venom in his voice cut sharper than any blade. For 15 years, I worked late shifts at Brookline Cafe, scraping enough to cover the mortgage while Nathan floated between part-time gigs, always claiming he was waiting for the right opportunity. I paid the bills, did the shopping, and even covered his car insurance when his jobs disappeared, which was often. Nathan, please, I whispered, my fingers trembling as I picked up the suitcase. We've spent 15 years together. Doesn't that mean anything to you? He let out a bitter laugh, one that sent a wave of nausea through me. It means I wasted 15 years being tied to someone beneath me, he snapped. My dad always knew I was destined for something bigger. That's why he left me everything. And with that, he slammed the door of what used to be our home, shutting me out, literally and figuratively. But it wasn't just heartbreak stirring inside me. There was something else, a quiet voice, tucked deep in my gut, whispering that Nathan might be celebrating a bit too soon. Arthur had always treated me with more affection than his own son ever managed. In fact, I was the one who cared for him in the end, not Nathan, who barely looked up from his phone. Looking after Arthur had been one of the few moments of peace in my marriage. While Nathan moaned about the smell of prescriptions or the hassle of hospital appointments, I cooked Arthur's favorite meals, helped him with medication, and listened patiently to his stories, tales of how he built his property empire from nothing but bricks and grit. You're a good soul, Rachel, he told me just a week before he passed, as we sat watching the sunset from the back garden. Nathan was inside, as always, on his phone. You remind me of my wife, bless her soul. She had that same strength in her heart. I smiled and gently squeezed his frail hand. You don't need to thank me, Arthur. Your family. He turned to me with those sharp green eyes that age hadn't dulled. Family isn't just about blood, love. Sometimes, it's about who shows up when it counts. At the time, I thought it was just a sweet sentiment. I had no idea how prophetic his words would be. Nathan never once treated his father's illness with compassion. He complained endlessly about Arthur being in the way, about the noise, the appointments, the decline. I remember the disgust in his voice after one particularly difficult day for Arthur. Why can't he just go to a care home or something? I didn't sign up for this. I was floored. He's your father, I told him. And we're living in his house because he let us move in after you lost your job at the warehouse. Nathan rolled his eyes and turned back to his phone. Whatever. This place'll be mine once he's gone anyway. That conversation haunted me. Arthur had overheard it. I saw the pain on his face, even though he never said a word. But I think, in that moment, something in him shifted. Now I was in a cheap motel parking lot just outside Liverpool, staring at the 36 pounds in my wallet and wondering if Arthur had seen something in Nathan the rest of us had ignored. His funeral had been small, just a handful of people. Nathan didn't mourn. He scrolled through his phone, whispering to his brother, Simon, about what the inheritance might be worth. "I heard the portfolio's worth over £50 million, Simon muttered during the service. "Plus the house, the land, all those shares." Nathan lit up like a kid unwrapping presents. "First thing I'm getting is a yacht. Maybe one of those sleek ones I saw down in Brighton." I was appalled, not just by the greed, but by something else. I caught a glimpse of Edward Chambers, Arthur's longtime solicitor, standing at the back of the room. He was watching Nathan with a look I couldn't quite place, not grief, not pity, something closer to disappointment, maybe even expectation. After the service, Edward approached me kindly. "Rachel, I'm truly sorry for your loss. Arthur spoke so highly of you. He thought the world of you." "Thank you, Mr. Chambers. He was a good man. I'll miss him deeply." He nodded, then looked past me to where Nathan was already planning holidays with Simon. "The will is being read on Friday at 2 p.m., Edward said. "Please make sure you're there." His tone made me pause. "Nathan said it was only for family," I replied, confused. Edward's expression hardened slightly. "Arthur made it very clear, you're to be present. He insisted on it. Those words haven't left me since. For the last 3 days, Nathan's been walking around like he already owns the world. He's been calling estate agents, eyeing new cars, even touring penthouses in London. But something in Edward's voice keeps echoing in my mind, like the solicitor gave Nathan a look that reminded me of a schoolteacher staring down a student who hadn't bothered to prepare for an exam. Sitting in that small motel room just outside Birmingham, picking at a stale sandwich from the petrol station next door, I found myself thinking about all the quiet, intimate moments I'd shared with Arthur. The way he used to light up when I brought him breakfast. How he insisted on paying for the groceries every time I drove him to the shops. The countless times he talked about his late wife, and how much I reminded him of her. "Nathan doesn't deserve you," Arthur once told me, after his son had mocked my job at the cafe. "A man should treasure a woman who works as hard as you do." Now, with barely any money and no idea what my future held, those words clung to me like a lifeline. Maybe Thursday would bring more heartache. But deep inside, a quiet hope was growing, that it might bring something else entirely. Thursday arrived wrapped in clouds and drizzle, the kind of gray that matched the heaviness in my chest. I had spent the night at a modest holiday lodge, the last bit of credit I had covering the room. Nathan hadn't called to check on me, not once. When I tried to reach him about our shared bank accounts, he sent me straight to voicemail. Edward Chambers' law office was set inside a restored Georgian house in the city center, polished wooden floors, towering bookshelves, the faint smell of leather and old paper in the air. Soft classical music floated from hidden speakers. The whole place whispered of legacy and wealth. Nathan showed up 10 minutes late, wearing a brand new suit that I knew, deep down, he'd paid for with money from our joint account. He carried himself like a man who was moments away from winning the lottery. His brother, Simon, was right behind him, both of them barely able to contain their glee. "Sorry we're late," Nathan said, oozing arrogance. "Was on the phone with a yacht broker down in Marbella. Gotta start planning how to spend all this money, right?" Then he noticed me in the corner. His grin faltered into a frown. Why is she here? This is a family matter. Before I could respond, Edward appeared in the doorway. He was a composed man in his early 60s, silver-haired and steady, with a quiet authority that filled the room. Nathan, Simon, Rachel, thank you all for coming. Please, join me in the conference room. The space was dominated by a massive oak table surrounded by leather chairs. Edward took his place at the head and opened a thick file in front of him. Nathan and Simon sat together on one side. I took a seat across from them. The physical distance felt symbolic, a line drawn between what was and what could be. Before we begin, Edward said, adjusting his glasses, I want to make it clear that this reading will follow Mr. Arthur Langston's instructions to the letter. No interruptions. No questions until I finish. And no disputes until the will has been read in full. Nathan leaned forward, smug. Whatever you say, Mr. Chambers. I'm ready to hear about my inheritance. Edward's expression flickered, barely noticeable. Nathan, before we begin, did you happen to read the copy that was sent to you last week? Nathan waved him off. Have you ever been underestimated, ignored, or betrayed? Tell your story in the comments, this one's for you. I skimmed it. All that legal jargon's a headache. Figured you'd explain everything. Besides, I already know, Dad left everything to me. I am his only son. Edward raised an eyebrow, just slightly. And you, Simon? Simon shrugged. Same here. Nathan said it was all just a formality. Then Edward turned to me. Rachel, did you receive a copy? I shook my head. Nathan told me I didn't need to. Said it didn't concern me. For a brief moment, Edward's professional composure cracked, and something that looked a lot like anger flashed behind his eyes. That's unfortunate, he said. Because it most certainly does concern you. The room went still. Nathan's confident smirk faltered. Simon shifted uncomfortably. I felt my heart start to pound, even though I wasn't sure why. Edward opened the folder and pulled out a thick document sealed with ribbon and wax. The last will and testament of Arthur Langston, he announced, dated April 14th of this year. April 14th, just 2 months ago. That was after Arthur's second stroke. My mind raced, trying to piece together what had been happening at that time. Nathan's remark about shoving Arthur into a care home. Me, spending even more time by his side. Let's begin, Edward said, and something in his tone told me the next few minutes would change everything. He cleared his throat and read aloud. I, Arthur Langston, being of sound mind and body, do hereby declare this my last will and testament. To my son Nathan Langston, who has shown little appreciation for hard work or loyalty to his family, I leave the sum of £4,000 and my grandfather's old fishing gear stored in the garage. The words hit the room like a lightning strike. Nathan's face morphed from smug anticipation to stunned confusion, then disbelief. Wait, what? That can't be right. £4,000? There has to be a mistake. Edward raised a hand calmly. If you'd read the will, Nathan, you would know there is more to come. To my son Simon Langston, who moved to Canada and visits perhaps twice a year, I leave £8,000 and my collection of vintage tools, with the hope that he may finally learn the value of building something with his own hands. Simon's jaw dropped, but he was too stunned to speak. Nathan, however, began to unravel. This is insane. I'm his son. His heir. Where's the rest? The company, the house, the £63 million? Edward's face remained neutral, though I caught a flicker of something behind his eyes. Satisfaction, maybe. As I was saying, he continued, the majority of the estate, Langston Construction Limited, currently valued at approximately £52 million, the family residence and surrounding land valued at £7 million, along with all liquid assets, investments, and personal belongings totaling an estimated £4 million, is bequeathed to another individual entirely. I could hear my own heartbeat thundering in my ears. Nathan looked like he might be sick. His skin had gone ghostly pale. Then Edward spoke again. To Rachel and Langston, he read, who has shown more love, loyalty, and devotion to me in 15 years than my own blood ever did in a lifetime, I leave the entirety of my remaining estate. The silence in the room was deafening. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. I could barely process what I was hearing. Nathan made a strangled noise, somewhere between a gasp and a sob. Then Edward reached back into the folder and pulled out another envelope. Mr. Langston left a personal letter to accompany this bequest, he said. He asked me to read it aloud. Edward unfolded the letter, and I instantly recognized Arthur's careful handwriting on the cream-colored stationery. My dearest Rachel, it began. If you're hearing this, then I've passed on, and you're just now learning that I chose to leave the legacy of my life's work not to my sons, but to you. This wasn't a decision made out of anger. It was the result of years of observation and deep reflection on who truly embodies the values I built Langston Construction upon. Nathan tried to interrupt, but Edward read on, unbothered. For 15 years, I watched you work tirelessly, juggling multiple jobs to support my son while he chose leisure over responsibility. I watched you care for me during my illness with real compassion, while Nathan moaned about the inconvenience. I saw how you treated our home with respect, while he saw it as a stepping stone to cash in. Most importantly, I watched you live the values I spent my life trying to instill in my children: kindness, integrity, perseverance, and humility. By now, Nathan was gasping for air, and Simon looked shell-shocked. But Edward wasn't done. Rachel, you might wonder why I never told you about this decision. The truth is, I needed to see how Nathan would treat you when he thought he had already won. His behavior in these past months, especially how he discarded you the moment I passed, only confirmed that I made the right choice. Suddenly, Nathan jumped to his feet, sending his chair skidding. This is insane. She's not even blood. You can't just hand over my inheritance to some waitress. Edward's voice turned to ice. Sit down, Nathan, or I will have security escort you out. Your father's will is legally binding, properly witnessed, and fully valid. Nathan collapsed back into his seat, his face red and slick with tears. There has to be something I can do. I'll fight this. He wasn't in his right mind. I anticipated that, Edward replied calmly. Arthur underwent a full psychological evaluation just weeks before signing the will. Dr. Eleanor Marsh, the psychiatrist who conducted it, found him completely competent. Her report is part of the official record. He returned to the letter. Rachel, I hope you use this inheritance wisely. Langston Construction employs 43 people, good people who deserve stability. The company is profitable and well managed by my foreman, Robert Maddox, who's been with us for over 2 decades. I believe you will continue what I built and grow into the business step by step. For the first time since this began, I found my voice. Mr. Chambers, how did Arthur know Nathan would treat me like that? Edward set the letter down and looked at me with gentle eyes. He called me the day after you left the house. He was still alive, barely, but alert. He told me Nathan had already contacted an estate agent and was making plans to sell the house. And he spoke at length about you, your future, your worth. He asked me to make sure you were present today because he knew Nathan would try to keep you out. The room swayed around me as the weight of it all crashed down. Arthur hadn't just seen Nathan's true nature, he had planned for this moment with the precision of a man who understood justice. There's more, Edward said, turning back to the letter. Nathan, if you're listening, know that I still love you as my son. But love doesn't excuse a lifetime of entitlement. Maybe losing what you never earned will teach you the value of work and of treating people with respect. Simon, the same applies to you, though your faults are those of absence, not cruelty. Nathan was sobbing openly now, the reality finally sinking in. He had thrown away his marriage, revealed his true nature, and unknowingly destroyed the very inheritance he thought he had in his grasp. Edward folded the letter and looked around the table. There's one final instruction. Rachel, Arthur left you a sealed envelope to be opened in private. Derek and Simon, your inheritances will be distributed within 30 days, as required by law. Most of the estate transfers to Rachel will take several weeks to finalize, but they are legally binding as of today. As Nathan wept and Simon sat in stunned silence, I realized my life had changed forever. 3 days ago, I had been thrown out of my home. Now, I was the owner of a multi-million-pound empire. But more than that, I had been seen, valued, and chosen by a man who recognized my worth when the one I married refused to. Justice had been served, and Nathan had orchestrated his own downfall with every cruel word and selfish act. What followed was swift and merciless. As Edward explained the legal ramifications, Nathan's world collapsed by the minute. The house he planned to sell wasn't his. The company he expected to control now belonged to the woman he'd called worthless. The £63 million he boasted about? Nothing but a fantasy propped up by arrogance and delusion. I need a word with Rachel, Edward announced. Nathan, Simon, you're free to go. Someone from my office will contact you about collecting your remaining items. Nathan looked up, eyes bloodshot and desperate. Rachel, please. You've got to understand. I didn't mean what I said. I was grieving. We can fix this, can't we? We're still married. The irony wasn't lost on me. 3 days ago, he tossed me out like rubbish. Now that I held his father's fortune, he was begging for forgiveness. I looked at the man I'd stood by for 15 years, the man who showed his true colors the second he thought I had no value. Nathan, I said calmly. You made it clear, you don't need me. You said I was useless. You threw my life into the street and slammed the door in my face. Arthur saw you for who you really were. And now, so do I. His face twisted in panic. This isn't over. I'll take you to court. I'll prove you tricked him. Edward stepped between us. Nathan, I strongly advise against threats. Your father's will is airtight. Any legal challenge will only bury you in court costs you can't afford. I suggest you focus on finding employment." Nathan and Simon left in shambles, their dreams of easy wealth shattered by their own actions. I watched from the window as Nathan stumbled to his car, a broken man undone by greed and cruelty. Edward handed me the sealed envelope with my name in Arthur's familiar hand. "He wanted you to read this in private," he said, then quietly left the room. With trembling hands, I opened the envelope. "My dearest Rachel," it began, "if you're reading this, it means justice has been done. Nathan has received the wake-up call he so desperately needed. Know that naming you my heir wasn't to punish him, though he'll see it that way, it was to honor the truth of who you are." Tears blurred my vision as I read on. "You spent 15 years being overlooked and taken for granted by a man who gave nothing in return. You worked yourself to exhaustion to support someone who never supported you. You cared for me in my final days not because you had to, but because that's who you are. You are the daughter I never had. The most deserving person I've ever known. This money is not a reward, it is recognition." The letter closed with practical guidance on managing the business, and a heartfelt suggestion to create a foundation for women who, like me, had once felt invisible. "Use this gift to build the life you deserve, and perhaps help others find their own worth." As I folded the letter, I felt an overwhelming sense of closure. Arthur hadn't just secured my future, he had validated every sacrifice I'd made in silence. His final act wasn't vengeance. It was justice. I walked out of that law office no longer Nathan's discarded wife, but the owner of Langston Construction and the architect of my own fate. Revenge hadn't come for me, it had come from a man who saw, who judged, and who acted with the clarity of someone who understood the meaning of true justice. In the weeks that followed, Nathan's downfall was brutal. Word spread quickly across Manchester, the arrogant son disinherited by his own father in favor of the woman he had once cast aside. His attempt to contest the will crumbled in court, especially after the psychiatric evaluation and witness statements about his behavior. With just £4,000 to his name and no employable skills after years of freeloading, Nathan was forced to move into the basement of his mother's flat, a shadow of the man who once strutted through life bragging about a fortune that was never his. His reputation was ruined. Prospective employers couldn't ignore the man whose own father entrusted millions to someone else. 6 months later, as I signed the paperwork establishing the Arthur Langston Foundation for Women's Empowerment, I smiled, not because I had money, but because I finally had worth. Recognized. Validated. Seen. If this story moved you, hit subscribe. Here, every story reminds us that a woman's worth is never defined by those who disrespect her, but by those who see her strength. Looking back on my journey from discarded wife to powerful businesswoman, I understood one truth clearly. The best revenge is letting someone reveal their true character while the world is watching.